Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Blockdyke,
Here?
Commissioner Sarkia,
Here.
Vice Chair Hamel. Here. Chair Heady.
Here. Do I hear anything for reordering of the agenda? Not much to reorder. Presentation, none. Approval of minutes. Do I hear an approval for last November 7th meeting?
I motion to approve.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Consent.
I have to abstain.
Okay. Consent calendar, none. Continued public hearing, none. New public hearings, none. Other business, a preliminary review of the Creekside Village mixed-use project, 19 FDP-01 and 19 LLA-01, 480 Avenue of Flags. And Irma?
Yes, all right. Thank you, Chairman Heady and members of the Planning Commission. Creekside Village, you've seen before already, but this is the first time that we're actually presenting the formal application. The applicant has submitted the application and paid their fee deposit, and we are going forward with the process for the application. And there's two applications involved here. One is a final development plan, and the other one is a lot line adjustment. The vicinity map for the project, it's at the southeast corner of 2nd Street and Avenue of Flags. And it consists of two parcels comprising one lot that they're proposing to build on. And this lot line is important. That's why we're having a lot line adjustment going on too, because this lot line would have been running in the middle of the building, so that's not something that we look favorably upon. So the entire property, in essence, is in the 100-year flood zone boundary. Zaca Creek runs at the back here. 50-foot creek setback is required. Trail access, public multi-use trail is required along here. The site area is 1.64 acres approximately. It is within the Avenue Flag specific plan with an underlying zoning of CR, general commercial. There are currently, the site is currently being used for multifamily residential. You can faintly see there's the buildings here. There are actually three separate buildings, one story and a two-story building up front and another building back here. These buildings are proposed for demolition. The vision for the project is to create a residential and commercial community that will really bring a sense of place on the Avenue Flags. We're looking at it, the applicant is looking at it as a potential hopeful catalyst for future development, the applicant and the city as well. It will create a distinct identity and architecture for downtown. The project is consistent with the Avenue Flags specific plan, and it reflects the Art Deco design inspiration that's required in the specific plan area. So, since the project was submitted for concept review, there have been some changes. There's a slight reduction in the commercial space, and there is no longer a live-work component. This is all commercial at this point. The commercial space is on the ground floor. It's oriented to a walkable, shoppable Main Street. It is a town plaza corner courtyard with a specimen oak tree, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later with the site plans. There's indoor and outdoor parking provided. The indoor parking is below the podium that supports the second and third floors. On the ground floor, there's also a fitness center and a bike room for residents. There's an entry lobby off of 2nd Street that leads to an elevator for residential units, and it leads also into the parking structure. And they are providing the multi-purpose trail along Zaca Creek. The second and third floors are proposed for residential, 64 residential apartment units. It's a mix of studio, one-bedroom, and two-bedroom units. And there are private outdoor patios shown for 36 of the 64 residential units. The plans have evolved a little bit since the last time the commission viewed them, and the pedestrian pathways have more landscaping components, they have more amenities. The second floor has a bocce ball court, 2 laundry rooms, a club room. The third floor has a roof deck overlooking the corner courtyard, and Second Street as well. And there's fire pit, barbecue, prep counter, tables, and lounge chairs. And there have been just amenities added to the project and to reflect some of the comments that were given through the concept review. There's also open space provided for the residential units. The requirement per our code is 250 square feet per unit for a mixed-use project, exclusive of the required landscaping. So for this project, given that it's 64 units, there's 16,000 square feet of open space required, and the project has provided 16,190. There's some minor clarification of open space and landscape areas needed that we can just work through with the applicant. Just recategorizing something, because at one place there was, I think, double counting of the landscape areas. But there's enough square footage dedicated to both so that this shouldn't be a problem to clean up. The building height in the allowed CR zone, in the CR zone, the building height allowed is 35 feet. Architectural features and elements such as the roof towers, flagpoles may reach up to 50 feet. The building as proposed is 38 feet with architecture features going up to 45 feet or less. And would just like to point out here that this overall building height to the top of parapet is really only 3 feet higher than what's allowed in the underlying CR zone. So it's a pretty modest profile building. The Avenue Flag specific plan allows a 50-foot maximum height with the DOR program. So this is something that we've put into the DOR mix as to be worked out. The density of the underlying CR zone for mixed-use project is 15 dwelling units per acre. So this is a 1.64 acre site, would yield 24 dwelling units. So the proposed project is coming in at 38 dwelling units per acre for a total of 64 dwelling units. And this is within the range of density that's allowed in the Avenue of Flag specific plan. And I'm going to repeat that it's a potential range allowed with the DOR program incentives and benefits again. So this is another element that will be considered as we work out the DOR program with the applicant. Setbacks required. So if you will recall, the Avenue of Flags is using a form-based code development standards format, so there isn't the traditional setbacks that you would see in the zoning code, but there are some setbacks to consider. The front and side setbacks may be provided but are not required, and the project is showing approximately 1 foot setback along the front and side street, so that would be along Avenue Flags and along Second Street, and some of the setbacks are further articulated with pop-ins to allow for some potential small little street furniture elements, and this was something that was brought up at a prior meeting. There is 0 setback provided along the interior side, and we'll take a look at that on the site plan when we get to that point. The rear, there's a 50-foot setback required from Zaca Creek, and the project plans to reflect the variable 118 to 142-foot setback for the building itself, and the setback generally follows the top of bank contour. Within the 50-foot setback area at Zaca Creek, there are some elements that are allowable, such as circulation and parking and landscaping and the trail. So these are being proposed for that area. So another element that we were looking at is for setbacks, the specific plan form-based code states that building heights exceeding 30 feet at the property line need to be set back an additional 10 feet above the 30-foot line. So you have a 38-foot building, so anything above the 30-foot level needs to be set back 10 feet. Generally, this is the third floor for the proposed project. There are some setbacks provided, but overall, it falls short of meeting the 10-foot setback requirement on the northwest and south property lines. This setback deviation may be allowed via a development plan modification, or it may be thrown into the mix for the DOR. We typically do, we do include setback requirements as part of the development plan modification and where we can make findings to support it. So we'll see how that moves forward. All right, a long day. Affordable housing ordinance needs to be addressed as part of this project because the residential is being proposed. So it needs to meet the 15% inclusionary housing requirement, which means that 10 affordable units need to be built on site. This is being proposed as part of the project. Another aspect of the city's affordable housing ordinance is that there's a call for potential replacement housing for the existing 19 tenants that are currently living there. And this actually may be fulfilled by the inclusionary offset credit that is allowed in our municipal code 19.16.016, where a project is given credit for building affordable units as part of the inclusionary requirement, and they get a credit of 2 units of replacement housing for every affordable unit that they build. So this would, in essence, take care of the replacement housing requirement as well under our current code. The project will also be required to provide relocation assistance for the existing tenants. Parking. So for the commercial area, there's 10,670 square feet of gross floor area proposed. And it's important to note that this is gross floor area because that is how our code is written. The parking ratio for this is 1 space per 300 for retail uses. And it's also 1 per 300 if there may be some restaurant type uses. However, restaurants may require additional parking for employees. So this is something to be considered moving forward on the project. But the commercial, as it's currently configured, 36 spaces are required, and the project is showing 5 indoor garage spaces for the commercial uses. For the residential, a total of 64 units are proposed, again, consisting of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. So for the studio and 1-bedroom, the requirement is 1 space for each of those units, and the 2-bedroom units will require 2 spaces per unit. So the required parking for the residential use is 101, and they're providing 103 spaces. There's also guest parking requirement, which they're, calculating into this mix. So overall, the project requires 137 spaces, and they're providing 108 spaces, and they're 29 spaces short. So this is, reduced parking is also an item that may be addressed via the DOR incentive package. Other parking elements, the loading spaces required for commercial uses, and they are showing this loading space. Bicycle parking, they're showing a bike room, which I understand is for the residents. And there are no public bike racks shown at this point, but this is something that the commission may request the project to include. The project generally complies with the Art Deco design style per the Avenue Flag specific plan. The architectural design review report that was completed by the city's contract architect, we received today, and it was distributed to the Planning Commission and also provided paper copies. We'll need to provide the applicant. Do you have any more of those? I can email those to you, but the report, in essence, stated that the site plan was complete, that is, they didn't have any comments or corrections on that. On the building design, they had some comments, and the comments consisted of comments on the north elevation. They had some kind of they commented on the difference in the facade design and how it lacks a little bit of cohesiveness. But we can take a look at this when we look at the project plans. And then there were some clarifications that were requested of some drainage items, and also labeling the elements of the project that communicates the design intent. So these are items that can be taken care of as refinements and updates to the plans. But in general, it was felt by the contract architect and city staff that they're meeting the intent of the Art Deco design style as set forth in the specific plan. Okay. Landscape and hardscape elements. So the standards that are required for this project would be a 15% minimum landscaping of net site area in the CR zones, of which 25% may be hardscape. So for this project, they're requiring 10,703 square feet of landscape area. Of that, 2,675 may be hardscape. The project is proposing 11,012 square feet, so a little over 15% of landscape area, so they've met that requirement. And of that amount, 2,430 is hardscape, so they also have met the, they're under the maximum hardscape calculation. There are 7 mature trees, including 2 tree clusters shown on the property that to be removed. And one of the tree clusters is labeled live oak, which is a protected species under the Native Tree Protection Ordinance. We'll need to get some information on measurements of the cumulative total of the stem diameters at breast height, and if this measurement is 12 inches or greater, then the cluster would be considered a protected tree, and it would need to be replaced at a 3-to-1 ratio. And then in further iterations of plans, irrigation plans will be required. And staff had a question as to how much landscaping would be done in the actual creek area, kind of similar to how the Avenue Heights just north of 2nd Street treated some of the creekside areas. So as far as signage, so for commercial projects, allowable signage area is calculated at 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage along the longest street frontage, which for this project is 2nd Street, and then a half a square foot for the side street frontage, which in this case would be the Avenue flags. And this is for the purpose of calculating sign standards. So the maximum allowable square footage of signage that the project could have is 451 square feet. They are proposing 174 square feet, well below the amount. And this information was provided to us as a supplemental dimensions to the project plans that were submitted, and I have a copy of those plans up and can show you what those measurements and locations are. A separate sign permit will be required for for the project because they are not including a request for a sign permit as part of the development plan. And at the time the sign permit comes in, that will need to include a master sign program because the project has more than 2 tenants. And at that time, we would review the sign program to be consistent with the design elements of the specific plan and the Art Deco design style. So this would be coming in at a later date. Exterior lighting fixtures and the location of these fixtures are shown for the ground floor lighting. And the applicant has indicated that similar types of fixtures will be used on the second and third floors. But some of the layouts are still in flux, so the locations of the light fixtures are still being fleshed out on the plans, but they will be included in future iterations of the plans. And they will be consistent also with the Art Deco style and dark sky friendly. Vehicular access is provided from one main driveway along 2nd Street at the rear of the property. This provides access to both the exterior parking area and the indoor garage. And it also provides potential future through access to the adjacent property on the south. And this is something that was reflected in the avenue specific plan as something the city would desire to provide for secondary access at that location, and any property developing to the south would be required to hook up to this location as well. Pedestrian access on the ground floor to the commercial uses is along Avenue Flags and 2nd Street. It's at sidewalk level, so direct sidewalk frontage. The residential uses are accessed through an entry elevator lobby on 2nd Street. And there are stairs in the parking garage and at the southwest corner off of Avenue Flags that provide entry as well from different locations to the residential uses. Street and sidewalk improvement plans will be required for the project as part of the building plan review set. And as I mentioned before, the existing lot configuration consists of two parcels, and the applicant has filed a lot line adjustment proposing to remove the interior lot line of the 2 parcels, thereby creating one proposed parcel. So there will be no issues with that conflict. As far as environmental status goes, the project qualifies potentially for a categorical exemption under CEQA guidelines as an infill project. And there are 3 criteria that need to be met in order for this exemption to apply. The site shall be no more than 5 acres, surrounded by urban uses without any habitat value. It shall be consistent with applicable specific plans, general plan designation and policies, and zoning designations and regulations. And criteria number 3 is there shall be no significant noise, air quality, or water quality impacts, and the project can be adequately served by public services and utilities. So criteria number 3, we are going to perform an evaluation to determine if significant additional traffic-related impacts would result above the potential impacts that were considered as part of the Avenue of Flags specific plan, MND. There were a number of vehicle trips and related improvements that were triggered and studied in phases as part of the MND, and we considered a first 5-year increment for construction of a number of units, and this project falls below that number, so they're potentially within what was studied in the MND. So we're going to have our traffic engineer just prepare an evaluation to see if this is falls within that criteria. And at that point, if there's a need for additional environmental studies, we'll determine it at that time. So that's the status of that. And some of these other impacts would kind of fall out of the traffic evaluation. Traffic begets noise and air quality. So we would kind of take a look, but those items were covered as part of the MND, and it doesn't seem at this point that water quality impacts would be affected, and the project can be adequately served by public services and utilities. And this is a summary of the potential incentives that may be sought by the applicant for this this proposed project. Building height, and there's 3 additional feet above the baseline zoning allowed, that's 35 feet. The increased density, so they're looking for additional number of units, so yeah, sorry, there was a typo here. So the baseline zoning would have allowed for 24 units to be built, and they are building 64 units. And the reduced on-site parking, required parking is 137 spaces, and they're 29 spaces short. So these would all be put into a potential DOR package, and we would be sitting down with the applicant to go through potential public benefits that they are proposing to offset the incentives that they're asking for the city. And the potential benefits could consist of, for example, construction of an off-site parking lot, contributing to the median 2 parking spaces, or improvements to the median 2, constructing a public restroom, and others, that may pop up as part of our discussions. The only thing I would like to add here is that the benefits that the applicant is providing should kind of match. If they're requesting a parking reduction, then they need to be throwing in some parking, and if there's building height issue, what is being proposed that could offset that. So we will be looking at that. So it would be kind of an equivalent type of a program.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Wasn't there also maybe a DOR on the setback? I think you mentioned that.
So there could be a DOR. We have in the past handled setbacks as a plan modification,
Okay.
and so we're still looking at that. And if we can make the findings on that, and depending on the comments that the Planning Commission may have and come back from the other departments, if the setbacks and the overall project design seems to work, then maybe that's just a plan modification. So we'll see how that proceeds. Ah, it's right there. I didn't forget about that. See, you just ahead of me. Good job. Okay, so that was a lot. I know I went through that really fast, but this is the site plan. It's a little bit different than what you saw before. They've reconfigured the parking. They've eliminated, well, there's no more live-work. The fitness room, bike room, nice town plaza corner courtyard here with a specimen oak tree proposed, and this came out of a conceptual review process where it was felt that this really could be a very prominent location for a gathering place, contribute very nicely to the town plaza in the medians. Well, let me just go through this. So starting from here, this is the stairway that would access the second and third floors at this corner. Commercial. There are some pop-ins here along the frontage that, again, this was something that was discussed as part of the conceptual review process. One of the items that was mentioned also was that before the courtyard there was a larger, kind of narrower, cavernous configuration and backed up to the parking area. And this is configured a little bit differently, and it appears to have some screening here from the parking. And I know that's a question that had come up from somebody who was asking if that truly is screening, and the parking would, be screened from the courtyard area. So maybe the applicant can address that at their turn. Entry lobby. I mentioned the fitness area, the bike room, and staff had a question on whether this would be available to the public or not. If it's available to the public, there may be a need for exterior entry here, but we'll let the applicant address that. The loading zone is provided here. The entry off of 2nd Street, vehicle entry, provides access to the exterior parking, which is here. And then interior, so this parking area, garage actually sits underneath the 2nd and 3rd floor, so it's like underneath the podium. So the entry, this is the entry, and this is the entry to the garage from the outdoor area. Landscaping between the parking and the trail. Creekside Trail is right here, and top of bank, and the creek. So this is a depiction of the ground floor for the landscape plans. And I'm going to need to switch to another set of plans. That the 2nd and 3rd floor landscape plans were so big that the computer didn't like them. I couldn't translate them into an individual set to put into this presentation, but we have those available to look at. Just really quickly, street trees along Avenue Flags, specimen oak, street trees along 2nd Street, other perimeter landscaping here at the parking area, and at the edges here. And some of these trees, as we'll see when we do get to looking at the landscape plan, do come up through the podium level up to the 2nd and 3rd floors. So the floor plan, and this is the architectural floor plan, just in a little bit more detail of, well, actually the site plan showed this really well, but this is just showing the walls and the parking. Let me just flip through these. So this is the 2nd floor that shows the residential units, and private patios are shown for a number of the units. So interior patios along the walkways here, and to the exterior as well. And this is the 3rd floor plan. So these areas, I believe we were looking at this earlier in the office, and these appear to be open to below. And when the architect gets up, maybe that's something that we can just clarify how these all interrelate on the 2nd and 3rd floors. The elevations, there were comments made at the conceptual review that the elevations, the design overall should be a little bit more Art Deco and less Moorish, and the applicant has taken a stab at doing this and has provided some nice elevations. And also, this particular plan, they provided some measurements to the top of the architectural elements here that were not on the plans that went out originally to the Planning Commission. So they're below the 50-foot maximum that's allowed in the specific plan, and that is the 50-foot maximum line. So, but this is the 38-foot measurement line right here, at the top of parapet. And so, sorry, so this is the 2nd Street frontage, and this is the Avenue of Flags frontage. And these are the, this is the east elevation, which is the rear of the property. The entrances to the parking garage are here, and this would be the interior lot line, which faces to the south, to the neighboring property adjacent. And this is a perspective of that shows the corner courtyard. So it's been configured a little bit differently, and it's got more of a courtyard feel to it. So, and some indication of color and materials have been provided in future meetings. As we get closer to the public hearing, we will be requiring a color and materials board, but this is an example of what the project is looking at including. We did have one question come up as to whether this is going to be smooth stucco, so that's something that we would like to clarify. It's the grading plan, and their Public Works reviewed it. There were not an awful lot of comments on it. And the lot line adjustment map. So, again, 2 parcels, and they're simply proposing to eliminate this lot line in the middle here. So, these comments were in your staff report. I'm happy to answer questions about these. I'll just quickly run through them without a lot of detail. There will be some minor technical updates to the project plans. As I mentioned, environmental review, meetings to flesh out the DOR terms and conditions. And so we put this in here, a minor use permit would be required if the signage exceeds 400 square feet. Doesn't look like very close to that, but in case it does get close to that amount, a minor use permit would be required. Separate sign permit, mentioned that, and a development plan modification for the 3rd floor setbacks. Future iterations of the plans would need to address any comments in the design review report, any comments that come in tonight as applicable, the color materials board, and the applicant will need to submit the trash and recycle area plans to Marburg for review and incorporate any required design considerations into the next version of the plans. The final landscape plans must include the model water efficiency landscape ordinance statement. That was not on the current plans, but that can be added. And replacement trees would need to be shown if the tree cluster, the native tree cluster is found to be of a sufficient size to warrant replacement. And they will need to show locations of the exterior light fixtures on the 2nd and 3rd floors. So these are Public Works engineering comments on the plans. A separate street and sidewalk improvement plan will be required as part of the building plan submittal. The flood study had just some minor technical corrections that were found in the floods. They were nothing major, but they're just minor items that will need to be corrected. And the grading plans would need to include topography on at least current topography and at least 50 feet off-site as well, so it needs to show the adjacent property. So that's something that can be added to the grading plans. The applicant has indicated that they've made contact with Department of Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife. There has not been any meaningful comments at this point because the project, when they were reaching out, didn't have a formal submittal and a formal permit numbers. So now that they've submitted the formal application, they can continue the discussions with Fish and Game on this item. And the bottom, last item on here, utility plans will also be required as part of the building plan submittal. And the lot line adjustment map, I know we've spoken to the surveyor who prepared this, but we're going to be reviewing it to make sure that it clearly delineates the existing versus proposed property lines and the initial versus final lots, and it's just notations on the plan sheet. That's nothing major. So I would yield to the Planning Commission. If any of the members have any comments at this point, or if you would like
Questions?
to bring up the applicant at this point.
Okay, I think I had some for staff here. Any questions of staff?
I had that one, and this might be for the applicant. In the presentation section, and this is like a tiny little thing. Bottom of page 3, it says, the applicant has indicated they are in the process of addressing the existing water heater closet encroachment on the southerly property line. I was just kind of curious what that was. Should we have the applicant?
Sure.
Okay, well,
Let's-
do that later?
Oh, shit, yeah. I can just
Okay.
write it down.
Yeah, let's see. I don't think I have any other questions.
I've got one. So the surrounding properties, and I'm thinking of the, I guess, just right across the way, the new apartments that they built there. What's the density of those? This seems like a very dense project. Any idea what those were?
Oh, I can look it up, but.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for...
I know that there's a total of 62 units on that site, with regards to what the size of that lot is.
Okay.
I have to look it up, but
I
I can.
would imagine it might be more than 1.6 acres.
Yeah.
And it's also vertical. Well, this is vertical living too.
Yeah, that was the apartments there are two-story,
Two and
three-story.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's, I guess I'd like to sort of see how this compares to other one, because this seems very dense on there, so if we would find that out. In the DORs, boy, for what we're giving up, I mean, I would think it would have to be some very hefty DORs on there, especially for the increase in density and the lack of parking. So to make up 37 spaces, I think it was. So I think I'd like to, before having all those, I'd like to see some of the ones that are almost in concrete.
Okay,
On something like that, but we'll
okay.
that's it. So, any other things?
What's the standard width of a parking space, standard parking? I know they had some
I believe
issues.
it is 9 by
9
16 and a
9
half.
feet.
9 by 6.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps we can hear from the applicant.
Of all the comments? Or
Yeah.
comments for myself?
We'll have questions for you.
Hi, great. I can touch on some of the comments, and then Michael, our architect's here as well, to touch on the design elements.
Brandon, if
oh.
you could please state your name for the record.
Brandon Mann, applicant with MB Development Company for Creekside Village Apartments. So thank you for coming to this meeting. I know it wasn't scheduled too far in advance, so really appreciate it. But really excited to be up here. One thing I wanted to mention is, and Irma had brought it up, since we came in May, we first were in front of the commission. We have made many changes to the project and the site plan overall. There was a lot of comments about what amenities were there for the current tenants. We feel we've made it a more community feel for that Creekside Village Apartments concept. We've kind of made it a more efficient. The podium actually was reduced by about 25%, so the actual building size was shrunk from the plan that you all had seen in May. And we've kind of changed a lot of the design elements, added a lot of landscaping and just, I think, color to it, but we can speak to more of that. I think one of the big comments that keeps coming up is, the density in the DORs. As being a local Buellton resident and somebody who really wants to transform the avenue, we're also the first project truly trying to take advantage of this plan. I think if we were the third or fourth project, it would be very easy for us to know exactly what kind of things we put forth, as far as investment or anything else, like what that's going to mean, but we are taking a very large risk. Construction costs are extremely high for us right now, so we're just trying to understand where we sit, and we want to do everything we can to provide back to the city of Buellton. I think Irma brought up some good points with the parking or a bathroom on the median, and we're going to be having further discussions with planning, and I believe it's a council vote to decide what the ultimate DOR becomes. But we feel, by taking up almost all of 2nd Street, redoing the sidewalks, providing the Zaca Creek trail, even though it kind of abuts at the next property, hopefully it goes through. We lose parking spots by providing the access that was required to go through the other property line. And we just feel that since we are the first person to come here, we're trying to do our best to see what we can actually provide. I wish that I could provide the moon, but we're going to try to do the best we can to lay out something that we feel is comparable. But we're doing the best we can, and we need to have more discussions with city staff and council and figure that out. But we're really thinking about it because I'm going to be here for a long time, and I want to make sure that this project gets built. And I think if it does get built, one of the parts of the vision is to be a catalyst for future development. If this project doesn't go through, I don't see another developer who isn't from Buellton taking the risk to come forward and propose a project like this unless they see something already being successful. So Patty, to your comment about the water heater closet encroachment, we have talked to the neighbor. I think right here on the property line, there's that abandoned, China Panda Chinese restaurant that used to be there, and there's on the side there's an old water closet that actually encroaches on our property, and we've had discussions with the owner, and we'll deal with that as we get closer to building. And then as far as the, I think the DORs I mentioned, the density, again, I don't want to, with the current market and everything else, the only way the project pencils for us is to achieve the density that we need to achieve. I wish that there was a different market out there that we could do less units, and I don't want to have to charge rents that they see in Los Angeles or Santa Barbara to have to build 30 units on this site. So we want this to be an affordable option for people living in Buellton that have to commute to other places, or people in Santa Maria or anywhere else that have to go all the way to Santa Barbara to work. For the people working in the brewery industry and the winery industry, we want this to be an affordable, comparable project that is higher than's there right now. We want it to be a little bit higher than the Avenue Heights and be something that really draws people. But that comes with, either there's a trade-off there. One thing we're also considering is the podium-style building is something that lasts for a very long time, and it's more looking into the future. It is extremely expensive. Concrete, and with the size of our podium project, will last us, 30, 40 years into the future and be a beautiful luxury project, but it is maybe 6-7 times more expensive than building wood. And we're trying to, I believe in that investment in Buellton, but again, that comes with, having to trade off for density or something else to make it work. So I have Michael here who can speak to kind of the design elements and what has changed, and can answer any questions about the design and the site plan of the project. And if you have any more questions for me, please let me know.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Michael Holliday. I'm an architect with DMHA. We're the architects for the project, so we appreciate being able to be here tonight, and it's been great working with staff and working through all the comments. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the architecture. Kind of just to comment on what Brandon's talked about, we put a lot of energy into this, coming up with the most efficient site design that met all the criteria that are fairly significant. We've got the top of creek, we got the 50-foot creek setback. You might want to just show where the podium's been reduced, if you could. There were, that whole area, because we were almost out to the red line.
Yeah.
Last time
Before.
with the last project that you shown, so we've dramatically pulled the building back because there was a question, comment about reducing the mass and bulk of the building. So that's actually moved back from the creek. A project like this wants to be out and engage the street front. So really, you don't want to move this thing back. You're just losing efficiency on the site. So I think part of that engagement at Avenue of Flags and Second Street is by design. It's exactly what you want. And we've got, I think last time there was a lot of discussion about the openings for the sidewalks, and we've got adequate sidewalks all the way around along with landscaping, and we've created those little kind of pocket parks where people can have little tables and chairs. Can we look at the next plan? I think it shows it a little bit better.
And I actually can pull up I have the entire submittal, plan submittal, and a separate file, if that would be better to look at.
Yeah, I think seeing the landscaping on, because that's the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
active area
I-
is the second and third floor. People are going to be living.
Okay,
and
so
just to see the scale of that.
I couldn't get that into
Yeah.
this.
If you can even zoom in on this, is there a way to
Oh.
open it and then just we can look
Sure,
at the plus, I think. Yeah, there we go. And then just scroll down to that along this, because we really
this is,
yeah, there we go. If I can, I'll just kind of walk and just show you what we've looked at to try to develop those. Yeah, or maybe
Okay.
you can even use the hand along there. So we've actually laid out tables and chairs, little two deuces and along the front there, because I think that was one of the questions. Are you really going to be able to enjoy that street area with the new sidewalk there and provide the landscaping? The answer was yes, by moving the building back. So I think that rhythm is going to be a nice, it's all part of the architecture when you look at how it primarily engages Avenue of the Flags, and we've continued it up on the corner. Let's kind of go up a little bit, and you can see how that little plaza and outdoor dining area wraps back into the corner there. And there's a couple reasons that we kept that design. That was one of the things the planning commissioners liked quite a bit. Was number one, it's going to be in the shade in the heat of the day, and then even when the wind's blowing, that's going to be a shaded and protected area for if it's cold. So there'd be probably outdoor heaters, but we've laid out actual tables and chairs with deuces and four tops just to give you a sense for what the scale may be. And those little shapes or ideas for the hardscape, that's something we can spend more time looking at. But then the raised planter area with the specimen oak is kind of the big corner statement. So I think it'll be very much in keeping with what we talked about. We just sort of embellished that a little bit. And then if we go back down Second Street, the architecture.
Also, Michael, real quick too, you screened the parking as one of the comments from the planning commissioners before was to screen the parking, so we do have a parking screen there as well.
Yeah, you might mention that with the hand, so that basically you're not going to be able to see any parking. So those walls would be screen walls that when you're in that little parking court, you have no idea that the parking is so close. But to be able to come and park and meet ADA requirements, it's going to function, I think, pretty well. There'll probably be some cool graphics and signage on the front side of that to kind of delineate the different, components of what's. There's also sort of a back of house that you can circulate and access the different functions on the back sides. Let's go down a little bit down here. So we've kind of really spent some time looking at how nice that can be and developing it at concept level. I mean, we've got a real good sense for how the trees and landscape and where we're going to have ground cover and how that's going to work. It actually, we're already dealing with the stormwater management requirements, which we meet, which are pretty significant. And then as you go down a little bit more, the project gets simpler because we're, getting a little bit the way the site constrains. Zachar Creek pushes back, still significantly back from where it was last time. And then we got these little vine pockets on the south elevation, which are just where we pulled pieces of the building back there. You can see those. Again, trying to make this as efficient as possible. As Brandon mentioned, if we don't achieve this efficiency, there is no project. Just so you guys know. I mean, that's the construction costs are just killing us right now. And so if we don't get the density, the project dies. That's just the reality of it. I'm just trying to be, as the architect, I've told them that, we've got to keep that. So I know it's a tough situation to be in, but our hope is we get one good project built and there's a balance. So we've tried to really think that through to get the site plan working as efficiently as we can to meet these requirements. We can go up to the second and third levels real quick if you can. And
so,
That's the other file, right?
yes, or just zoom out and
for the landscape.
yeah.
And while she's in that, Michael, do you want to mention the these parking spaces are pretty large. I think at the council hearing, there was a comment mentioned, can you fit a large truck, as most residents in this area will be driving? And you had mentioned you can get your F-250 in there, so is that still?
They're 9 by 16 and a half, which is a standard size space. I'm really sensitive to that personally. I know what you're talking about, but they're adequately designed. We haven't put the compact spaces in there. So it's going to, and you can see by the efficiency of the plan, it works pretty well. Let's scroll through, get to the landscape levels. Yeah, so there's the first level, and let's go to the, what we try to do is really, with color, you can see how much of this is developed, and obviously we want to take it further, but for concept level, we just wanted to illustrate how much of the project is for open amenities. So, you can kind of imagine these Mediterranean villages, and that's why the title of the project, Creekside Village, they want to keep that village aspect. So all of these open areas, the bocce ball courts, along with those exterior decks, we think would just be a really nice complement to what's available out there on the current market, which doesn't have a lot of these kind of common amenities. But for a project that's right at the core of where your downtown, specific plan is located, this is the kind of project that you want. And we've just indicated, some outdoor seating and different ways for all of that to be developed, which we want to take further. Also, this looks down, you can show with the little hand area, looks down into the open court, so that looks over some handrails down into that area. So in those spaces, you'll be able to orient to looking out towards the north and to the west.
I also mentioned the bocce ball court, we're considering it as one of the options, but I wanted to put it in there to show kind of the size and scale. So that's like a full regulation bocce ball court. Just these open areas are very large. Almost all the area in Brown is being able to be used by the residents as open space. There are some spaces that are covered by the third-story walkways, but the bocce ball court area, so all of this is open to the air, and all of this is open to the air, and all of this is open to the sky. But these are very, very large spaces, so we can make a mix of amenities in there with tables, chairs, or any other kind of things, but I just wanted to show the scale of how open these spaces are, so you can really live on the second floor of this building. We also we took out one of these units and added a club room here. So for the residents, if anybody wanted to have a private event or party, or if anything happens on the avenue, they can rent out a kind of private club room on the site. And then the third floor will show, we put the wine deck up there. So there will be a third floor wine deck that is well positioned for any of the events on the avenue, as the specific plan, calls for, like the auditorium and concerts or anything else. So it should be, very cool.
If I may just ask a question. So, so this is open to the third floor, in essence, to the sky.
Right.
And this area is covered with third floor.
Right.
But it's still usable on
The dotted line right there, you can see, kind of
Right.
delineates where this third floor.
That's the edge of the third floor. So basically, this is not available for second floor pedestrian, or is
No,
it?
it is. So that is, so
But it's
somebody
just-
can sit here on a chair. They're just going to have, kind of like a roof above them, still have
Okay.
light coming in. And then we do have this space
Oh,
on the
okay.
third floor. What
Okay.
we may do is we may cut out some of these spaces too to provide more light. These are very large walkways in between, but for now, we just.
Okay, so down here, the same thing would,
That's the
would,
second.
Yeah, all that's
Apply.
accessible and usable.
it's
Public open
tucked
space.
under. Okay,
It's actually pretty generous. I mean, normally
Yeah.
you've got a little 5-foot walkway and you're going right into your unit. So this podium allows us to, moving the building shapes back and forth right along here, especially when you're able to jog the units that much, it allows for some of this relief, and we want to develop that. But we've tried to really take your comments to heart. This is significantly more open space than what we proposed last time.
I'm going to ask this question now, since we're talking about the open space and the second, third, and the roof. As we move along in the process, would you be able to provide like a cross-section or some kind of elevation like that, where it kind of shows how the sun's filtering in from the roof to the third floor to the second floor.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was kind of hard. I mean, I looked at it about 3 times and then I'm like, okay, now I get it.
We actually have this built in a 3D computer model.
Okay,
So we
okay.
could actually walk you through it.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be
Okay,
really cool.
Yeah, because it's the walkways, the overhangs, it's hard to visualize three-dimensionally, even for us, but when you can look at the model, it really shows you that these are pretty dynamic spaces, because this is up at like 9 feet, and then you're looking all the way up, so even just getting you some sketches of a few key areas would help you to visualize kind of what this mass looks like when you're back here maybe. So it's an easy thing to do because we've got it built in a computer model.
The fly-through of the 3D model is very interesting, and we can share that.
Yeah.
That would be interesting
It's,
to see.
we're dealing with building blocks, and if you go, well, let's go look at the next plan real quick.
Okay.
Because I think these kind of all tell a little bit different type of story when you look at the second level, and then there's a third level. Yeah, so we can just, we included, there we go. So this again shows the amount of open space. The way that these units offset, there is probably an opportunity here if we wanted to notch something out or open it, but these are common amenity spaces really, which are pretty nice. This is your standard condition that you get, is a 5-foot hallway. So we've really tried to open this looking down into that next space, and same thing here with trees. So one of the things we wanted to do is pull those trees up because they would be actually viewed at that level. So that's where the 3D, you're exactly right on, with like understanding how that works. But it's really much more of a village and opening. What we did for this plan from the other one, we consolidated, we had a bunch of these smaller spaces like this, and we said, let's really minimize these little areas, there's an open space, and try to provide these big open areas in the project, which will be much more, we think, a lot more meaningful. And there's hard to imagine a bad unit here. You come over here, you get the views out this way, and then you get the views in here, and I think that the computer model is really compelling when you kind of see moving from one space up and how you kind of look through those open areas there. It feels pretty good to us.
Yeah.
So. While achieving the density that these guys need to make it work. So it's way better than anything we've seen, down south. So we like the idea of the open spaces and still kind of achieving the unit mix that was. So and then I can talk briefly about, there's that wine deck. So these are some of the amenities that were added. These are all units. So on the lower level, we added that kind of clubhouse. And then this would be an upper level kind of a wine deck, which we thought was just really nice to look north, to look out for the residents to be able to go out there and use that.
That's cool.
These would be the private decks for this unit, but these are all the open common area decks. And then you look at the elevations.
And then all the cross-hatched areas, the walkways, those are all open to the sky at this point.
That's right.
there's
So
nothing-
that's all
this is all
open,
very-
natural
yeah.
space. And I think that's where the 3D components really help to show you, well, you can get a sense
Yeah.
for the negative space that's in light. That's kind of all open to down below and all the way up to the sky. There's no
Yeah.
roofs over any of that.
Yeah, and so these would be open, this would be open to the bocce ball court below.
Mhm.
And to the
That goes all the way up to the
patios
sky.
below, okay.
Mike?
Interesting.
Yes.
On the second floor, in those private patios that are back to back, are you going to separate them somehow?
Yeah, we've shown some screens at like 6 foot high.
Yeah.
So that those would be private patios. I mean, what we found is that on these kind of units, exterior open space, it's of different value to different people. And so some of these people may just love to have the views where they can sit out and look over, the avenue. These people might really appreciate a private patio where they can just go sit. And yes, they're going to have units up above, but that's like all over Europe, and even in Santa Barbara. These are highly desirable where you could have, if you look at our floor plans where these would be sliding glass doors that open out into individual patios that open all the way up.
Okay.
And we had a circulation area in here, and we just said, let's just get rid of it. We were really trying to make all the circulation pathways efficient. And then, this little diagram here helps to show how cool you're undercover here, you're open here, This is like some of our housing projects at Manzanita Village and stuff, you've got these experiences where this opens up and then you're compressed a little bit, then this opens, even if you're undercover here, this is all open above, so there's a lot of variability on the interior stuff.
And just to touch on that, as Michael mentioned, we're still flexible with this, but we used to have these units smushed together and then the private patios on this side. But we felt that, and I've lived in a multitude of different apartment buildings and seen them, when you're walking through and somebody has like a 3-foot wall, it's kind of awkward to look into their kind of private patio a lot of the time. So we thought it'd be interesting if we combine them all, and whether we screen them, and we'll work on that depending if the commission or council or city requires it. But a lot of newer apartment buildings, people want sometimes shared space, and so I was thinking that could even it's a very large area, and if all of those studios, didn't mind having a giant, maybe faux grass place to play on with, if they had kids or whatever else, it's a, large amenity space that can be used, or they can be sectioned off and just be large private patios. But we're flexible.
Maybe we
Okay,
can
so-
look at the exterior elevations real quick. And I hadn't seen the comments, but I actually agree with some of the observations. So these are the unit plans, which we can we have all this in the computer and it's modeled, and actually the furniture is in the model. It's pretty amazing. But let's look at that last plan, because this kind of shows how open it is. This right here. This is actually what you would perceive when you're in the space. This is all open to the sky. So being able to show the landscaping coming up through these, and you can imagine this is like kind of a Mediterranean, it feels like a village. So we kind of really like the way the massing worked out. And here, in some of these areas you just have a circulation pathway, but there's other ways to get around. That was another question that came up. Getting through, remember last time there was some sort of a little bit of a dead end corners, still meeting code, but you can kind of get wherever you want to get in the project now with the over connected walkways and overlapping pedestrian spaces. We can dial in on these a little bit more, but they're pretty nice little units too. All of these are fairly well vetted, and we've just plugged them in the computer.
So Mike, will the walkways there that's the 3rd floor, will they be covered somehow by either the eaves or?
We have not shown them as covered. We haven't done a roof plan. Some of the areas can be on the ground. This was a question. We haven't really gotten into that level of detail. There's pluses and minuses for it. Obviously, the pluses is if there was some kind of some sort of cantilever covered walkway, which works really well with the Art Deco design. But it also costs you on some of the visual open feel. So we haven't really looked at that 3rd level of being covered. 1st level would be, and certain areas would be between the units. So looking at those roof connections on the 3rd level is kind of a next level of design. We haven't really kind of gotten there yet, but I mean, you want to be able to walk out of your unit and not get wet. So you need to be able to find a way to make that happen and still get to the stairways.
Yeah, it's a trade-off too visually, because this is going to be a 3rd-story building, but with the step backs and the way we've massed it, it's not going to seem as large as you'd think. However, if we covered the whole building like a apartment building, downtown Santa Barbara or anywhere else, it would just seem a little bit out of place if it was all just an interior apartment building. So we wanted to keep that, kind of San Ynez Valley open feel. Maybe we'll do, retractable kind of awning, or I've seen kind of poles with cloth that you can put up, or tarp during, if it ever rains. It doesn't rain up here often, but yeah, we're dealing with that.
The other idea was that there could be areas where you pop out, like for instance, we pop out here and come back, and maybe come back in around like that. So there would be a way to, all of that would be covered, and then you don't cover certain areas of this. So getting into the real detail of how all that masses up.
It's just
I think
water.
Pardon me?
It's just water.
Yeah, we're thinking through the 3-dimensional quality of the space. You can kind of get a sense for it by the negative. The white there is all open space, so it's really, we've tried to work hard to listen to what you guys have commented on, and starting. Those are pretty generous spaces when you look at comparable types of units. Let's kind of go to the elevations real quick, and I can talk about those.
Let's see how to navigate these files. These big files were
Yeah.
A little bit of a challenge to,
Do you have that on the other PDF though? Might be to the presentation that you did.
oh, the elevations,
yeah.
I do.
There we go, that's what we
Yeah,
want.
And I
but,
believe the plans we submitted also have kind of a sample cross-section as well, if you want to.
well, that's
Yeah.
what, those are in here. Some of these, like the landscape plans, I just could
Oh,
not
I
pull
see.
off. So tell me which one of these you'd like.
Well, we can just zoom in on both of them, actually. I'd like to just zoom in and address some of the comments since we were last here. Let's go down to Avenue of the Flags. This elevation was the one that everyone sort of liked, and was maybe,
The vertical.
yeah. This was the property line, this was one of the comments that came up. Let's go back over here real quick. Our property line is right over here, so this is the graphic area. But we've tried to mass the building. This is the typical Art Deco styling. If you look at it, it's sort of big moves. And so these elements out here being in front and then that being pushed back with the signage elements kind of popping out in front. I mean, that's sort of your quintessential Art Deco proportion. And, then we've got the decks up above for the residential units. So it was hard to kind of come up with something that we thought was working pretty well. And then getting all of this little detail, although it's just suggestive, I think you can get a sense for how strong it would be architecturally. And maybe we can just go around to the corner, go a little bit more to the left there.
While you're on this first floor as well too, one thing that Red brought up was the kind of the flood mitigation. I noticed that for the building across the street from us, I believe it was 518 Avenue of Flags, in their plan, they had raised the building by 4 to 5 feet. And even Avenue Heights had chose to raise their apartments. But we felt that if Avenue Flags is going to be a main street, you really don't want to be walking up ADA ramps or anything to get to the street frontage. You want to be able to kind of walk in and out. And we were able, with a great our general contractor and working with, the City Public Works Department and our engineers, do a flood proof of the building so that we actually can keep it ground level and we won't have to raise the building. So I think our building actually falls in shorter than the other approved building, even though we technically have 3 stories and they have 2 just because of the 4 to 5 feet that we don't have to raise it, and it will provide a way better shopping experience and walking experience for the residents. It's also going to look better too, not having to have a step back raised building. So.
I mean, we can.
Now we can scoot.
Thanks for addressing that. I was trying to figure out how
Yeah.
you were going to do it.
Yeah.
That was huge.
We
I mean,
had to stop for, I know we were in the process, we were like, hey, we're going to submit in September, but it took us about 45 days of saying, look, it's either going to cost us $2 million to raise this building and we're dead in the water, or we can figure out how to do it cheaper, significantly cheaper, that obviously we're moving forward, and still keep that really important feel of not being 5 feet off the ground to start with, so.
and the way that works, all of this part of the building is all waterproof. It's just the openings that have the gates, and they got to be kept on site. But basically, there's floodgates that are put in there because you only know a day or 2 ahead if you're going to have a massive flood.
Yeah.
So they flood-proof these openings, and that allows the building for the water to come up to whatever the 100-year floodplain is, and still we're up above it.
And luckily, all the residential is about 13, 14 feet above anyway on that podium.
Yeah,
there.
just
So
the ground
it's
floor
really just
commercial.
the ground floor commercial, which helped.
So,
yeah.
how would the commercial units be accessed if you have flood-proof gates that come up?
Oh, you're not.
Oh, okay.
No, this is flood,
Is it
debris
emergency?
flow,
Yeah.
microburst.
Evacuation time.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
like, we're ready for the big one, and if it doesn't come, they just pull them right out. I mean, it's fairly common, we've done them on a number of projects in Santa Barbara. We're getting more accurate forecasts, but when we think there's gonna be something significant, those
Okay.
would go in within a matter of a day or 2 and
what
come out in a day or 2.
What about the courtyard and going into the parking lot?
Yeah, and the backside, by the way, you could access it on the backside. So this would be shutting down the front from public access, but on the backside, you'd have flood-proof accessibility doors. You'd still be able to come and go.
And would it shut the courtyard down too?
No, the courtyard would be open. So, theoretically, the water wants to flow through the building, believe it or not. And so we would clear where all the glassed areas are, those get the floodplains, but the water would, we're talking catastrophic flood.
Yeah.
The 100-year, flood,
Yeah.
it would go through the parking lot in the back and drain out probably in the creek, but.
Well, that's where it wants to go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived through a couple of those in Santa Barbara back in 94, 95, and it actually just comes up in a day and it's gone. I mean, it's not like it sits around for a long time, but sandbags save that. Little 12-inch, 8-inch to 12-inch layers of sandbags. So that completely changed the character of this building to be, I think, greatly superior to the one right across the street. You raise the whole thing up, you're just fighting a losing battle, and architecturally, this is so much more desirable for ground level retail at a real pedestrian street level scale for Avenue of Flags. And then you can imagine the ADA, there are no ADA ramps, so we've eliminated all of that stuff. So we tried to create, and then the other building is sort of tinted back so that you're looking and seeing the signage and proposed massing for the building that's on 2nd Street. And then let's maybe look at the other elevation.
And this is the courtyard.
That's the courtyard right there, looking
Mike?
into the courtyard.
Mike,
Yes.
as you're mentioning the ADA, are any of the units going to be accessible, or are they going to be adaptable?
Yeah, there's accessible and adaptable. We've
Okay.
got to meet the criteria. So
Okay.
we provided some accessible, and I think they're almost all adaptable with a few exceptions.
Okay.
Yeah, real important. Let's look at not that elevation, I was going to look at the north elevation, because I think it's above this one. And we can maybe zoom out just a tad. I was just reading through the architectural comments, maybe 25. And I think they liked it. We actually had looked at a number of options there. These are some classic proportions that come off of an Art Deco. Like the buildings change a little bit as you go around the corner. One of the comments that he was just saying, what happened with this little piece? And I happen to agree with him. We were focused on the sort of front of the building wrapping around, and this could easily be, we could turn this into the kind of more of the front building and wrap it back to some level. So that could be a design refinement. But basically, these are the commercial areas down below. This is the fitness room. There's the primary entrance for the whole complex. And this is pretty traditional in the Art Deco style. They'll just do something kind of fun and creative on the building, and all it's doing is, this is all residential units, so it's kind of playing with the mass bulk and scale to articulate, in contrast, the balconies to where the rest of the building is. This is that wine deck up above that looks down in that area. This would be the little clubhouse room right there on the end. And then, this can easily be kind of wrapped in to be a little bit more of the front of the building, which is, I think, what they were requesting. And then we go around the back of the building. Let's look at those other two, just to see, kind of see what, this is that part right here. So we were kind of thinking through where do you want to stop this? And so we could easily figure out a way to kind of wrap part of the building back around to there, and then just come up with a rhythm that still has an Art Deco feel. This is, again, the back side of the building, but we still wanted to make it look nice. So there's the front entries, the balconies, the views that look out to the side, but, and here's facing probably the next project. So literally, we tried to think through that something there that's going to, be addressing the next future building.
The top is the south, right?
Yeah, this would be
Yep.
the south elevation,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
correct. So we met the criteria for the setbacks, and this kind of shows how those decks and patios would all work. There's that second level deck. You start to get a feel for the character right here. So if we start having overhangs up here, it really changes it. So we're kind of like, we want to be really strategic where we do that. And then I think there's a comment about this becoming a ground floor access to the main parking area, which we thought was fine.
Well, it just seemed like it was a logical thing.
Yeah, we had the exit stair there, so let's make it an entrance. And then here, this just again shows how you could come in and out of the parking areas. It just, instead of the whole building being white, we kind of like a lot of the projects that we looked at had just, you can get a real difference of impact just by the plaster textures. And this will probably be a smooth steel trowel plaster finish is what a traditional Art Deco is, with white, mostly white and off-white kind of paints. which is pretty easy to maintain, and it waterproofs the plaster. But, you know, we kind of really like the massing and the scale, and even though we're at concept level, we're talking about detail and balconies and handrails and the finials that are up here and the just simple architectural details. This is kind of what makes good Art Deco buildings. You know, if you just have an inch and a half of reveal there, you'll get a nice shadow line on those elements. So that kind of, had been way more developed since you last saw this. I mean, we didn't have any of this really developed at that level.
So I think it would be interesting for us to take a closer look at those setbacks along the property line there, because as I'm looking at this, at the east elevation here on the south side, it seems like you have a pretty generous setback that may not have translated into the site plan that I was reviewing, because that was the area that, you know, we were looking at. Well, is it set back 10 feet from the property line? And that was the intent in the specific plan, to give some relief to the, you know, the tall verticality, and set back the third floor. And so I'm trying to get a feel for what that would be here.
yeah, maybe we should go look at the floor plan.
Well, yeah, and, well, anyways, I'm just saying that we can
Yeah.
revisit that and just take a look at some of those details.
Yeah, I think a study session with the model and having Michael kind of walk through it, you know, with the fly-through would be good for everybody to see how it looks kind of, you know, in a 3D space, because we did build it. So.
Any other questions or?
Well, thank you, Mike, but-
Okay, sure, I can answer it.
You've been addressing so many of the questions already, so.
Okay, so, well, Mike, Mike,
Yes,
I'm sure, I know I have some questions, so
okay.
somebody want to start first?
Oh, I would just say, well, I really appreciate all the detail of the Art Deco.
Okay.
Because I'm the one that always talks about that. And just really appreciate everything you've done with the changes since the last time. Along those lines, and I know this is, again, in the future, but when you start going through the signage and more detail on the lighting, you know, if we can stay in that Art Deco style, we're good for that. That's the only, I'll save my other comments for later.
Oh, my comment is I really like the project.
Thank you.
You're in the right, you know, and a lot of the comments that I've heard, if you were going to address them, like trying to change that little thing on the side, not on this, yeah, that page.
Right.
But, and go with the smooth plaster, and some of Peggy's comments were good. The only thing I don't agree with is the density. I actually like the high density. It's the place to do it.
Yeah.
And
This is
No.
the place on this entire Avenue of Flags, right here.
It is
the
the place to do
So you
it.
guys, I mean, I'm just thinking as a planning commissioner, why did we approve a project like this? It was right at the heart of where you want to do a project. It's the first one, we got to get something off the ground. We're just telling you, if it has to get less dense, the project dies. It just doesn't pencil financially. So that's the reality. We're not trying to soft pedal that or over pedal it. You guys know what's going on with construction costs. So, you know, as an architect, I've been working with these guys to try to make this thing as sweet as we can. I go, you start taking out units and parking, it just doesn't work anymore. So that, I appreciate your comment about the density in this specific site. So another site a block or two up the way, it's a whole different game. But this is right at ground, right where you want to have
right in
this
the
kind of
center of
density.
town there.
Yeah.
Then the other question I had, just because I can't see it, is what is the width there from the curb to the building?
Oh, you on
The sidewalk area.
Sidewalks, let's go look at that, because we had 12 feet and 15 feet.
Oh.
We had the standards that we had to maintain.
So,
Okay.
where, site plan?
Yeah, site plan. And we can even zoom in on that one a little bit. I think we've got some dimensions called out in here, but you could see we had the tree wells, which we're talking about maybe even doing those in tree grates, so you can walk across this.
Oh, wait a minute, you want me to go
Zoom in
back?
a little bit more.
On this one or the other one?
Yeah, we want.
You should definitely do it with grades.
Yeah, that's what we thought was in the zoom.
Well, they did some other spots at Buellton without the grades. That's
Yeah, I mean, the scale.
I don't even know if those trees are going to survive.
These are 4 tops and those are 2 tops. So if we did some tree grades where you can kind of just walk along, I mean, there's a 3-foot door, so that's why we were saying you've got ample, and you want a little bit of this sort of modularity and rhythm as you walk along here, so
Yeah.
we thought, it's feeling pretty good. So we thought, at one point, that came up last time, how much space do we have? So none of this was on here, and we didn't know. So these are actual, four top and 2 top tables, so you could actually have this whole cafe thing working and still have all of the circulation here with some sort of tree grates where you're just able to walk over the top of those. So it feels pretty good to us.
I think you should definitely do that.
Other questions of the applicant?
No, I like the openness that you guys have been able to incorporate. I like it.
Thank you. We worked hard to try to listen to what your comments, and that's really what we're coming back to you with. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. And
That's not a public.
Oh,
Not a hearing.
Then I'll bring it back to the commission for comments. Bobby, you want to start?
I already said it, basically. I like what I see. I don't mind the density. I think it's a good spot for it. The parking, of course, I wish there was more, but I think we have to, we need the catalyst on the avenue if we ever want to see any growth there. So I really do believe that we should, when we get to that point, approve it the way it is. And I do want to say, I like the bike room too. I thought that was forward thinking. And I think parking may not be as big an issue 10 years from now. I think the whole landscape of what's going to be coming is going to change things. So,
Hope you're right.
even in Buellton.
Even car friendly. Marcel?
I'm good with it. I really like it.
Okay, so, well, I'll reiterate, I love the Art Deco. This is a project, at first, I actually went through it like 3 times, because I was like, wow, it is, there's a lot of exceptions, throwing us into the DORs. It is a little dense, the height's a little high, not enough parking, but overall, I really like the project. And I think we can address those issues with the DORs, the exceptions. Let's see. Yeah, that's really all I have. I do agree with Bob that this is the right location for the density and for the project.
Okay. Well, my feelings on the density, but I understand the economics of it. I think I'd like to see some more development of, there's some minor details, and I'm not going to get to them, but just the trash situation and how that's going to work, and is it a 4-yard, or how does Marlboro get it out of there? I'm not sure, other than putting the screen up, whether garage safety, for people at night, I know we talked about it beforehand, are you going to have a night watchman, or are you going to close it down at some point? But, that could be a scary place on there, dark. You added some amenities, I liked that. They're all adult amenities, pretty much. I'm not sure if there's a way to do, I'm not sure what age group you target, but is there some way to make a more kid-friendly amenities? Because I imagine there are, this did some figuring, maybe 144 people probably would be the minimum you have there. And I'm sure there's going to be some children in that group. And, the 3rd floor, you're just basically corridor. I like the design. Hopefully the DORs reflect what we're giving you, and you can give us back something in appreciation of that. Or should I say quid pro quo? No, I don't think I should say that.
Something else.
Yeah. I have some military aid on there. Yeah, and I think I would like to see, and I'll ask for the consensus here, some public bike racks. The bike room is nice, but if you have a mix of public and resident bike parking, that's an easy place to go into, be shut down, have nobody around you, and it takes nothing to take a bike these days.
Yeah.
On there. I'm not sure how you're going to control that for the residents. key card or whatever.
Yeah.
But still, it's, if you, behind a locked door or a door, you can pipe a lock. So I think I'd like, if you think we should need some public bike parking? Okay. We
And
could-
an electric scooter station and...
Yeah, I mean,
What about the charge up by Tesla?
station.
well, I mean,
Let's
that's,
go to the Marriott for that.
yeah, and have have you been over there where it's just backed up out into the street to get the chargers?
Really?
Or I can call
Yeah.
Tesla, maybe they'll help me with the construction costs if I put in some,
Well, that's,
chargers.
maybe
There you
if part of the DOR is parking, maybe some of that parking you make Tesla friendly or something, or, I don't know if they make a universal charge on that, so. Did you own it?
I like Tesla friendly.
On there. Okay, I think that's our comments, so,
Great.
on there, so, thank you. Thank you. On there. So, that brings us to written communications. I see none. Planning Commissioner comments?
No.
NATO.
Planning Director report?
All right, so just a little update. The planning department approved the zoning clearance today for the bowling alley. So those plans are on their way to the building department for applications for building permits at this point.
And I will say that Andrea and the whole team did an awesome job to help us achieve the impossible. We're very, very pleased with the job that you guys did. And the city would be proud of all of their team. They did a really stand-up job.
Glad to hear it.
And you might notice a packet that I put in front of each of you. This is coming from Rose Hess, our Public Works Director, and this is basically some mandatory stormwater management plan training. And what she asks that you all do is read through the packet and sign the last page once you are done with that, and return it to her when you are done.
Oh, okay.
So, other than that, I just wanted to wish everyone happy holidays and a happy new year, because we won't see you till next year, so.
That's right.
Excellent.
I have one question. So we lost the pizza place next to H&R, correct? And now it's going to be California Taco?
I haven't heard any formal word on whether or not the pizza place is leaving and another restaurant is
We
coming.
haven't
Any
seen
formal word,
anything
we've
in.
heard, rumors of such, but.
California Taco is closing this Sunday and planning on moving over to next to H&R Block.
Okay,
That's
well.
that's what we ate there the other day, and that's what their sign says.
Interesting. Well, yeah, we've heard, different uses, leaving or coming potentially, but we haven't received any plans or anything formal at this point
Yeah.
for it.
And another Mexican food place comes back in its place. How many Mexican food places? Yeah, so you hadn't heard
We're not
anything?
hurting on it, no.
We had heard rumors, but nothing submitted formally at this
Yeah.
point, so.
I saw that they were doing abatement there the other day. So, something to,
But don't they need to get permits to put in stoves and sinks and all
oh, I
that
think
stuff?
so.
Right, so they would come to us separately for zoning clearance and tenant improvements.
So they're just
for
closing,
install.
but they're not moving yet because
Yeah, I
they're a
think
long ways
they're-
away from that. Yeah.
They were hoping for April.
Yes, so to back up a little bit, there are TIs currently in process with the building department for a pizza restaurant. But to your comment, in that northernmost unit in Pad A,
Yeah.
or the northernmost two. But in terms of whether or not they're switching over to some kind of a Mexican restaurant, we haven't received any plans to reflect that, any formal submittal to reflect that change at this point. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you, staff, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And at 7:35. So how we do on the meeting time? Did you guys make bets?